We have an unusual Good morning, everybody. We have an unusual situation this morning where both the chair and the vice chair are absent. In such circumstances, we elect a person to preside for this meeting. Are there any nominations for a person to preside for this meeting? Councillor Healy?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Parkhurst if he's willing to stand. Thank you, sir.
I'll second that.
Okay, that's been seconded. Are there any other nominations? No. So in those circumstances, congratulations, Councillor Parkhurst.
Diolch yn fawr, Chief Officer, croeso pawb, Boradar. I just want to say firstly that one of our members is struggling with hearing at the moment. So it is important that we all speak slowly and clearly, and speakers in the room do not need to look at me when they are making their comments. That's a departure from normal procedures where comments come through the chair. But in this situation, we're going to make allowances so that hopefully all our members can fully understand and participate in this morning's proceedings. So thank you for your understanding and cooperation with that. Following this meeting, there will be a private meeting for members with Audit Wales. So I just want to make members aware of that. So let's firstly go to item 1 on the agenda, which is apologies. Do we have any apologies, please?
Chair, we have apologies from Alan Rainford, and I understand we have apologies from Councillor Arnold Woolley also.
Thank you, Chief Officer. Any other apologies? No? Thank you. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations to declare? I don't see anyone indicating, so no declarations of interest. Item 3, the minutes of the meetings held on the 21st of January and the 10th of February. So taking the first of those meetings, which commences on page 5 of the agenda pack, if we go through each page in turn to see if there are any matters of accuracy to amend. So page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, and page 9. So no comments on matters of accuracy. Could I then have a proposer, please, to confirm that these are a correct record? Councillor Healy, thank you. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Shalcroft, thank you. All in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? So that is unanimously all in favour. Thank you. And then we move on to the minutes of the meeting on 10th of February, starting on page 11. So page 11, and that's it. So again, could I have a proposer? Councillor Healy, a seconder, Councillor Carberry, all in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Again, that is unanimous. Thank you. So item 4 are any urgent matters as agreed by the chair. Well, in this case, it should be by the presiding member, I suppose. I haven't received any urgent matters. Are there any other urgent matters? I'm not seeing any nods around the room, so I'll take that as none. So we then move on to item 5, the National Fraud Initiative, which commences on page 13 of our pack. And the purpose of this is to inform this committee of the audit work related to the National Fraud Initiative. And this paper provides an update on the exercise, local data for each audited body on data matches, and an overview of the future work. So I'd like to call on Lisa Brownhill, please, to lead this item.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. So there's a couple of elements to this report. So if I just take you through, initially the report was from Audit Wales, which you have as Appendix A. The purpose of that report was to set out the context of the National Fraud Initiative. It's been around since 1996, and the idea is where local authorities and other public bodies share their information on a biannual basis. That information is data matched, and then those reports come to the local authority. So the original report that you have on Appendix A sets out the as at a position in time in July last year. To give you some context, during that period, I think I've already shared that we had some recruitment difficulties within our team and some long-term absences. The key contact for the NFI work was absent for a period of time. That has now been resolved, and we have some resource from finance, and they are working with us on a regular basis. So we are coming up to speed with the work that we needed to do. What's really important, though, to understand is that NFI is just one element of fraud prevention. So this report takes you through to the next steps of what we've done with the NFI report, but also what we also do within the organisation as well. So as I say, Appendix A is a snapshot in time in terms of the NFI work that was at the 31st of July. That tells you everything about the data matches. So what you will see is there is a significant number of data matches. In total, there's like 29,000 data matches. However, when you look at it and break it down, you can see that maybe 21,000 of those are creditors where they've got the same amount, the same reference number, and it's where usually it's a monthly payment. So it's quite easy to disregard those in that sense. So we're left with a smaller number to look at. And then because of our resources so limited, we then look at the very high risk and the high risk matches. And that's where in the past we've seen that the benefit has come from. So that's the approach that we are taking this time. What you will see is in point 104 of your report, you'll see a table there, and it just highlights where we're up to date. So far out of those 2,516 matches, we've identified 621 where we're in progress. We've either completed them or we're investigating them. That result of that outcome so far is that we've identified £54,000 where we need to recover back within the organisation. You'll see slightly lower down on that section 104 is that there's an additional £30,000, and that relates to a previous NFI exercise. Within the report, you'll also see an Appendix D, which is a health check in what we should be doing with NFI. And overall, we are complying with that health check. We are doing everything that we can do. We are bound by capacity, though, in as much as that is our limitation. That's our restrictor in what we would like to do. We'd love to match all of them. We don't have the resource to do all of them, so we have to do it on a risk-based approach. Okay, I think probably the element of this report, though, is from paragraph 106 to paragraph 107. And that's what we also do within the organisation. So this is live, real-time testing that we do. So fiscal duplicate payment software, we run that following every payment run that we make. So for 2025-26, we identified 97 duplicate payments totaling £165,000 that we needed to recover. And as at a couple of weeks ago, we recovered all bar £200 of that. Another exercise that we do within council tax is using Data Tank Limited, and that's been proved again to be a really valuable exercise. We were originally doing it every 2 years, and we've realised the benefit of that is that we now run it on an annual basis. For 2025-26, we've identified 332 single discount payments that we needed to stop and recover, and that amounted to £187,000. So our combined effort, which is detailed in 1.07, is that over the 2 years, we've identified £1 million worth of money that we can recover as the NFI and our other data matching exercises that we do within the organisation. I'm happy then to take some training going forward. I know this was an area that a couple of members identified as part of their self-assessment. I had hoped to get the fraud reports and fraud policies here to this meeting, but unfortunately, resource-wise, I haven't been able to manage that. But as soon as they've been finalised, I'm happy to have a separate session with members to go through the policies, give you the opportunity to ask any questions. And if you have any more questions on the NFI, then obviously I can do that. What I will do this time around is include these figures in my annual report going forward. So I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you, Lisa. Can I ask if there are any questions? I think Councillor Healy was first with his hand up.
Thank you, Chair, Acting Chair, whatever, and thank you for the report, Lisa. I naturally think that as a committee we need to be concerned about the fact that this fraud, that we have been victim of fraud over the last 2 years to the tune of about £1 million. I'm sorry, have I misunderstood, Lisa?
No, carry on.
I'll go on. On reading the report, it struck me, and again, correct me if I'm under a misapprehension, that the two main areas where we seem to be vulnerable are with the council tax reduction scheme, and I can understand how people may well be claiming a council tax reduction when they're not entitled to it, so I can understand that. But the other area was in pensions, and I find it difficult to understand how we are being defrauded with regard to pensions. So if this is a legitimate question, can anybody throw any light on that? Thank you.
Lisa?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So when I say fraud, I mean, obviously we do data matching. So sometimes we give the individuals the opportunity to let them know if their single person discount has come to an end, that somebody has moved in. Sometimes they forget, sometimes they don't forget. They just don't tell us. What the exercise does is identify everybody. So we don't go down the stage of identifying if it's an intentional defrauding of the situation. What we do is just stop that payment. In terms of CTRS, now obviously I'm not looking at benefits at the moment. That's another piece of work that I want to do. But we will also look to see what they do, but they deal with the DWP as well. So they should have their own appropriate checks in place. We have council checks. The data tank is our council tax check, which is obviously proving very effective, which is why we're doing it on a regular basis. I think you'll find every local authority has this level of single person discount because it's the volume of what we're actually seeing. So I'm not too concerned about them. What I'm pleased about is our detection rate and our recovery rate, which was the good thing, which demonstrates that our proactive controls are working. So that's I'm happy with that. In terms of pensions, obviously pensions are reliant on individuals to let them know that the member has deceased. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are a local government. Obviously, within Flintshire, there could be another member because obviously Flintshire Cleary Pension Fund is slightly wider. What I would say is that since pensions have done this particular exercise, we had now within our audit review plan for next year, we are looking as to why they haven't identified those issues because they were equally concerned. So it's identified an issue, but we are looking at it from a separate angle as well. Okay.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Ellis, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report as well, Lisa. My concerns are page 15, 103, the resource capacity for such an importance. piece of work, it actually states, does it not, that there is no resource in place. And then on to 104, there is the potential, isn't there, to actually recover a lot more than we have if there was a resource in place. That is the way that I actually look at it. And also, could I ask as well, will there be some monitoring of performance as well? Will we monitor how well the performance is going? But I do think my major concern is the lack of resources, because there is the capacity to recover so much more money than we already have. Thank you.
Lisa?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, absolutely valid questions. Unfortunately, it's an issue that's across all local authorities in terms of resource, unless you have the likes of Cardiff, which has a dedicated anti-fraud response team. What we're trying to do to combat that is that I currently have a 0.6 position, which is currently a senior auditor position, but I'm going to transfer that over to a fraud investigator position, which means that we can then have dedicated resource, not a lot, but a dedicated resource within the team to pick up proactive fraud work that we want to do, the NFI work, and any other investigations that come through, because at the moment any investigations that come through then impact on the audit plan. So we are going to have that dedicated resource if we can recruit to it, which is that caveat again. Fraud prevention is not just internal audit though, it's across the organisation. So it's a management's responsibility to make sure that their controls are effective enough to prevent that fraud going out. What we want to do is not detect the fraud, it's prevent it happening in the first place. So that's the piece of work that we really want to be doing going forward. Yes, we would love to look at all of the data matches. What I would say, when you get to the lower risk, whilst it's a large report with a significant number of data matches, when you get to the lower risk ones, it's where maybe they are the same person, they're absolutely fine, it's just there is a misalignment with the address. So that's why we go for the higher risk ones, because we know that they're the ones that we really need to pay the attention to.
Councillor Ellis, does that answer your questions or concerns?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Claire Blanchard, please.
Hi, and thank you very much, Lisa, for the comprehensive report. Just one question. I'm interested to find out how progressive the authority is in utilising AI in doing some of this investigative work. And if not, do you have plans to utilise AI? Because I'm sure it would help facilitate your work and your role.
So we're not using AI at the moment. We've just got the AI policy. I think, has that just been finalised? Yeah, the AI policy has just been finalised. What I would say is that with all investigations, there is a human element. There has to be a human element to it, because you are actually comparing information and making a judgment call as whether that is a risk or not. I would be concerned to be using AI very early on until we've established a very robust process in terms of how we want to use AI, and we're not there yet.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chair, just come back on one point.
Please.
Councillor Ellis asked about monitoring. We are monitoring the progress of the NFI, so I will report in my annual reports on any further updates.
Thank you, Lisa. Anyone else got any questions or comments? And I'd like to please ask some questions to, I think mainly to Lisa. Are the processes for detecting fraud documented? It seems to me that there is perhaps an over-reliance on a single person. And if that person is not there for any reason, if the processes are fully documented, someone else can then pick it up. That's my first question. My second question is on page 32, paragraph 10, there's reference to 5 bodies who hadn't closed any data matches. And it doesn't sound like Flintshire County Council was one of those, but I'd just like to have confirmation of that.
Which page?
That's page 32, paragraph 10. And thirdly, was this committee previously aware of this lack of resource? When I read the report, it came as something of a surprise to me, and I don't think I'd been made aware of it, and I wonder if other members were aware. And if the committee wasn't aware, I think that's something which should be addressed in future, so that we have a sort of heads up on any potential risks. And finally, on page 17, the reference to the 97 duplicate payments of £165,000 which have been recovered. Those are presumably payments which have been made to our residents, which then have to be returned, which I imagine some people might find difficult. If they receive a payment, they might then spend the money and not have the money to actually return it. So it will create hardship. And I'm just wondering how we deal with that. So Lisa, if I can ask you, please.
All of those.
Thank
so
you.
In terms of documented processes, they should be. I can't confirm that they all are because we haven't looked at all of the processes, but when we get the new resource, that would be one of the things that we would be advising services to do. But I would be expect that to be an expected control. In terms of the 5 bodies, apologies, I haven't got to that bit yet, so I will do. In terms of resource, I have mentioned it from an overall audit resource. So maybe not being quite specific in terms of the NFI or the data, but that resource as an organisation is limited. So any additional work that we need to do, which is what is probably the benefit of the data tank and the fiscal, because it operates in the background and not a sit-down exercise, which is what the NFI is required us to do. The 97 duplicates, there is some limitations, so that will hopefully change when we get the new system, because at the moment we can't identify the payments before they take place. We have to identify them afterwards due to the interface. So hopefully that will change. I would say the majority are with suppliers rather than residents, right. I would say, because it's usually based on an invoice coming into different services, not through a feeder system. Okay. So apologies, I need to just look for this other one, page 32.
Lisa, I was going to say I'm happy to take that if you want, because I think it's part of it is part of our report. So the report that you've got in front of you, which page 32 I think forms part of that, is basically the context, and so it shows Flintshire in the context of Wales. So yeah, I can confirm if Flintshire would have been one of those bodies, then we would have made reference to that. So the fact that it says 5 participating bodies had not yet closed any data matches would mean that Flintshire isn't one of those 5. But obviously, because this is a report that's gone to every local authority, we haven't, if you want the best way to describe it, we haven't named and shamed those people. So, but you can be guaranteed it's not Flintshire, because that would have been captured within your individualised report, which this is.
But thank you very much, Emma. For anyone listening, Emma Woodcock is from Audit Wales. Thank you. So if there aren't any more comments or questions, we'll move to the recommendations, which are, firstly, the committee is requested to accept the report from Audit Wales. And secondly, the committee is requested to be assured on the progress made to date on the NFI, that's the National Fraud Initiative, work being completed, and over the additional fraud prevention measures in place. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Shalcroft. A seconder? Councillor Healy. All in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? No, so that's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. So we move on to item 6, which is the Audit Wales review of commissioning, which begins on page 53 of our pack. And the purpose of this item is to approve the management response to the findings of the Audit Wales review of commissioning. And I'd like to call on Chief Monitoring Officer Gareth Owens to present this report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Audit Wales undertook a review of commissioning in late 2024. It took a while to get the report finalised, and longer still, I'm afraid, to bring forward a response to that. So apologies for the delay in bringing it forward. First thing to talk about is what commissioning is. Commissioning is a thought process. People often confuse it with procurement because commissioning can lead to procurement, but it isn't. It's a thought process about what we want from a service and how best to deliver that service. Now, there are examples within the report of where we have chosen to externalize something through a contractor. There is an example within my own portfolio that isn't mentioned within the report to highlight what commissioning is, where we currently spend a lot of money with external solicitors defending disrepair claims in our houses. We've examined our spend on those solicitors, and we have concluded it would be cheaper to employ our own solicitors and legal staff to do that work ourselves. And so we will be recruiting, the HRA have agreed to fund 2 extra posts in the legal team, and we will be recruiting internal legal staff to be able to do the work that is currently externalised. So there is an example of a commissioning review resulting in work being brought back in rather than work being put out. Now, what we don't have within the organisation is a good way of recording that. Audit Wales found that we had some good practice across the organisation, and I've set out examples of where that is. But one of the things that our processes fail to do very well, or could do better, is recording that thought process around around commissioning. And part of the reason for that is because the quotes commissioning form that we have within the organisation is actually a form asking for permission to procure. And that means it suffers from an identity crisis or a lack of profile as a process, a distinct process in its own right. At the moment, to a degree, it is almost seen as a hurdle on the way to going to procure, rather than as a separate and important distinct process in itself. To give the process greater profile and emphasis, and to ensure, therefore, that we record it properly, I have drafted a commissioning strategy, which is attached, and I'll talk a little bit about the strategy in a moment. You will see that Audit Wales made a number of recommendations to us in terms of our practice, where we might improve practice. They found some examples of good performance. They found some examples of weakness. One of the examples of weakness is that we could think about collaboration with other public sector bodies more broadly. We think about collaborating with Denbighshire because we have a joint procurement service with Denbighshire. We don't tend to think about other councils in the same way. And so you will see that one of the things I have put into the strategy is a hierarchy of decisions to be taken during a commissioning process. The first of which is, do we need to do this at all? Because clearly when we are in financially difficult circumstances, that must be the first question. Very often the answer to that question will be yes, because this is a statutory duty with it that we have to fulfill. If we take the decision that yes, we still need to perform this service, then the next question is, can we do this in collaboration? That addresses the findings within the audit and the recommendations by Audit Wales. But those findings by Audit Wales are themselves based upon the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which says that one of the things we need to aim to do within the public sector is cut down duplication. And so in addressing the recommendations from Audit Wales, we also address that important statutory duty upon ourselves. So, Chair, the recommendations in the report were that the Governance and Audit Committee should be assured in a number of different aspects that the audit, the proposed management response and the proposed strategy address the findings of Audit Wales. Now, you come at the end of a 3-committee process, you being the 3rd committee, so that you can look back on what Corporate Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee have done and look back on what Cabinet have done in reaching your assurance. Now, some of you will know, and you will see from the report, that CROSC deferred this item. Cabinet, as a result, also deferred the item yesterday, which makes it very difficult for you as the 3rd committee in the chain to have final assurance in relation to the proposals. I can understand if you want to wait as a committee until the other 2 have performed their work. What I would ask, though, in the meantime, is if there are issues that committee members can see now, perhaps they could be raised now, whether you make a final decision today or not, just to give me more opportunity to start work. If you see that there are areas that need improvement, that will give me the opportunity and more time to work on those whilst we wait for the results from CROSC and from Cabinet.
Thank you, Chief Officer. Just in case anyone didn't hear the last remarks, Gareth Owens is suggesting that if we defer this item, we should nevertheless raise any matters of concern or of interest that we have, so that he can then pursue those pending the item coming back to this meeting. I noticed that Councillor Ellis was first with a hand up, and then Councillor Healy. Councillor Ellis, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to propose that we defer this item until it's been back to CROSC and back to Cabinet. I would feel more comfortable with the recommendations if it's been through the due scrutiny process.
Right, thank you, Councillor Ellis. Do I have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Carberry, thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you, Claire Blanchard. Do we take a vote on that now, Gareth, or do we have any further comments first?
Well, if there were any further comments, Chair, it would be better to take them before you do the deferral, because, of course, once you've voted to defer it, the item is...
We can't then speak.
The item is then resolved, yes.
So I now come to Councillor Healy, please.
Thank you, sir. My comments are not actually related to the previous proposal, if that's all right.
Yeah, please carry on.
I've got a question for Audit Wales, and I've also got a question for related to our own practice within the council. With regard to the whole thing of commissioning services, I quite understand that the priority has to be given to the thing that we call value for money. And that indeed is the first of the recommendations from Audit Wales, is that we look into value for money. And the second recommendation is the one about greater collaboration, and in particular collaboration beyond Denbighshire, with whom we do collaborate at the moment, but should be perhaps collaborating more fully with other local authorities and other public bodies, because again, I think that ties in with value for money. So I think these are certainly appropriate recommendations. However, in the report, it also picked up that within Flintshire, we are not always strong on fulfilling the well-being objectives. There was a reference to that. I'm sorry if I haven't got the page reference. But the report did not provide further clarification as to how we are falling down in not fulfilling well-being objectives with regard to commissioning. I've got to say, with regard to commissioning of goods and services, what we call the supply chain is actually the single most important factor in really the carbon emissions of a local authority or a public body. Not that Welsh Government counts those in the same way with regard to our journey to net zero by 1930, but it's nevertheless an important factor. And I think I would have welcomed in the report further clarification over the whole issue of the well-being objectives and how we're not fulfilling them. And maybe even if it were specific on that, maybe it's not the job of Audit Wales to do that, but perhaps a further recommendation as to how we can improve what they have identified as a weakness. Now, with regard to our own, I can see Gareth looking as if I haven't got it right here, but he'll be able to perhaps put me right. I'm also worried, a second question which more relates to our council is more specific details about how we monitor our support for the well-being objectives. I must confess I'm a little bit of a loss how we actually monitor our journey to net zero by 2030. We abolished our climate change committee, not that it was ever doing that job. It wasn't. It had its own agenda. We've also dropped the title of climate change from the title of the cabinet member. And I must confess, I'm a little confused as to what our own practice is with regard to scrutinising and monitoring that journey. But that is a separate question from the one which I was asking of Audit Wales. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Healy. Gareth, can I ask if the points raised by Councillor Healy can be included in your sort of review of our responses so that you can incorporate those in when it comes back?
I can do that specifically. I could also address some of them now, and it's possible that Duncan, who actually undertook the review, will, because I see he has his hand up. I think what Councillor Healy has referred to, Chair, in the carbon emissions is actually a really good example of a non-financial value for money consideration. When we talk about value for money, we tend to think about cost per widget and whether if we buy the cheap widget, it'll last as long as the more expensive widget. But we are a social business, if you want to use the term business, and we have non-financial policy aims. Carbon neutrality is part of that, and tracking whether we have achieved carbon neutrality through our service delivery, our chosen model for service delivery, is one of the things that we might need to be better at achieving. So we can talk a bit about that when I bring it back, but that's a really good example there of a non-financial service aim. And one of the things that Audit Wales did highlight, and again, I'm in danger of speaking for Duncan when he's got his hand up, is that we could be better at looking at the different models at the outset to see which model might better achieve our aims. So is it an in-house model? Would that enable us to achieve carbon neutrality better than going to the private sector, for example? And then recording that as part of our decision about why we choose to either keep a service in-house or externalize it. So there's something in there. There is something in there about how we monitor that. I mean, we do have broad systems for monitoring things like carbon neutrality through the wellbeing plan, but we could be better at that documenting process or documenting our thought processes in the commissioning stage.
Thank you, Gareth. I think at that point I'll call Duncan McKenzie from Audit Wales to comment, please.
Thank you, Chair. I believe the councillor with the first part of his question is referring to paragraph 19 of our report, where we talk about the impact the commission services could have on the council's wellbeing objectives and the wider wellbeing of future generations issue. We do highlight that we were given evidence and examples where officers clearly articulated the fact that the decision-making process about commissioning included giving consideration to how you provide a service could impact on the council's wellbeing objectives and on the wellbeing of future generations and the 5 ways of working. So we had some evidence of that. What we didn't have was that arrangement was routinely applied across all commissioning processes. And we could have a really long discussion about whether something is referenced in the report, whether it makes the cut as being a recommendation or not. That's kind of a little bit of a side issue. But I think the points that Gareth made around the kind of identity crisis around a commissioning form were quite pertinent to this issue. I think what we were steering the council towards is to ensure that they consider the 5 ways of working and the council's own well-being objectives as part of the process when deciding how it wants to deliver a service. And if it can do that on a routine basis, it will be in a pretty good place in terms of ensuring that the future delivery of services can support the council achieving its wellbeing objectives.
Right, thank you, Duncan. For the benefit of those in the room, if I can just summarise in one sentence, that this council did not routinely apply the wellbeing objectives across all commission services. So Gareth, can we make sure that when this comes back, if indeed that recommendation is passed to defer, that we look at that specifically, please? I think Claire Blanchard was next, and then Councillor Jones.
I'll be very quick. I was just wondering, I mean, it's an interesting report. I'm just interested in, perhaps Gareth could say a little bit more, if you benchmark against any other authorities and some of the best practice which has been highlighted in Flintshire, how do we get that out to the wider sector?
Thank you, Claire. So the question was, how do we get best practice out to the wider sector? Gareth.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. How do we how do we benchmark, and then how do we share good practice?
Yes.
I don't think we share good practice at the moment, specifically as a conscious act. One of the things that we do through at a commissioning stage, we do through procurement, but as I said at the outset, procurement and commissioning are different. So we don't have a network of people who are involved in commissioning where we talk about our internal processes around commissioning specifically, as in that commissioning is often referred to as a do we build it ourselves or do we buy it type decision. And we don't have a network around that. We have networks of procurement officers around the buy it stage, but that's downstream from the commissioning point. So we could give more thought to how we share best practice around that, how we learn from others. We look through things like the Audit Wales reports to see where they have highlighted examples of good practice elsewhere. Otherwise, you have to try and break into other organisations, into what might be quite an embedded process in other organisations, and that's quite hard unless you have the sort of privileged access that Audit Wales enjoy to be able to go in and command the attention of other organisations and the time to explain things to you.
Thank you, Gareth. Claire, does that answer your question? Yeah, thank you. Councillor Jones, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, for allowing me to speak. I think the collaboration one, in my view, would be the easier one to resolve, because it is a, and just to provide that evidence, I think it is an easier part of the solution. So I would like to separate out personally the value for money part, because that's the, and this is where this committee could really input something in to make a good change, because I don't believe we have a corporate definition of what value for money is. And if we had that, that would define things and take away from it just being a financial aspect, but to incorporate the type of things that Councillor Healy has mentioned. You know, if we had that kind of corporate value for money definition, we could put things in there which made us evidence it, made us think about the things that have been mentioned by Duncan. So it might be worthwhile to major on that here, to understand, or perhaps input into that here, so that we get that definition better. And I think that's something you could do here.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Jones. Gareth, can we incorporate that, or can you and your team incorporate how we define value for money when you come back?
I've already made a note that I need to add and or beef up the value for money definition within the strategy. If the committee is interested in that specifically, then I can highlight that within the report to this committee, so that when I do report back, you can look at and see how I've defined value for money in the draft, and be comfortable that you are happy that that is what you regard as the right definition for value for money. And is it being addressed correctly within the strategy? Because clearly the strategy that you set will then influence what people do across the organisation when they implement it.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Before you take the right. Strange, I've turned the mic. I've got to turn the mic on this time rather than turn it off. Right. Just to go over, we've spoken about the three groupings who are involved in this process.
Well, Councillor Johnson, can I just ask that you face the room?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'll move my speaker around here as well. There we go. Right. So I'll move back my machine as well around. Okay. So we've asked about the three committees: the Cabinet, Governance and Audit. The instinct is very, very strong to put the chair. Governance and Audit, CROSC and Cabinet. Now, each of those three bodies have been asked to do three different things. Now, if I go back to the members on this committee here who are on CROSC, I'm just going what CROSC was asked to go and do, because I think it's material to the decision we're making here. CROSC were asked, well, it was noted with CROSC that CROSC couldn't actually go and approve the report, but CROSC could note the report. Now, the resolution of CROSC was that, I'll go through it, I do apologise for reading through it, that the resolution was to note the management response to the Audit Wales review of the Council's commissioning activity, and any specific matters for the attention will be noted and reported back to Cabinet when it considers the report. The second was to note the commissioning strategy, again, any specific matters to be noted, to agree that Cabinet conduct a commissioning review. There was a fourth one put in there, which was about the Catholic High School, but the way it was done meant that all four recommendations were taken together and they, as a block, were defeated. So given that there was no resolution from CROSC, it was then resolved that the report be referred back to the author and represented to CROSC at the earliest time. I would suspect that had the resolution been to take each of those recommendations separately, then there would have been a series of resolutions, which the recommendations would have been accepted by CROSC. I have no doubt about that. But what Governance and Audit are being asked to do, and I'll go to look at our recommendations, the recommendation of this committee here, is to confirm the management response plan to the Audit Wales review of the Council's commissioning activity, that it satisfactorily addresses the recommendations, which is different to what CROSC was being asked to do. To confirm that the commissioning strategy will address the weaknesses found in the review, different to what CROSC was asked to go and do. To be assured that the proposed commissioning review of the Joint Procurement Service in conjunction with Devonshire County Council, which will support the recommendations in Audit Wales. Again, different from what CROSC was asked to go and do. So by deferring it, my simple question is here, what exactly are you deferring? because you are confirming and being assured. You're not making, there's nothing about noting or approving or passing comments on to Cabinet. So I'd just like to make it clear that when you do defer it and it does come back to this committee, what exactly are you going to be taking into consideration?
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. As I understand it, because this committee is the third committee in the chain, we need to take into account the views and comments of the Corporate Resources Committee and the Cabinet. At Cabinet yesterday, the decision was made to defer without discussion. So we haven't had the benefit of the outcome of the Cabinet's debate. Chief Officer has indicated following our discussion that there are some aspects of the Council's response which can be amended and incorporated and enhanced. So I don't see any detriment in deferring. It's not being obstructive. It's just taking into account a wider picture. And we have had a formal proposition from Councillor Ellis. I'd just like to ask Audit Wales really a question on this report. It's on page 54 of the pack, and it's paragraph 1.01 when it refers to the Council's use of the Proactis database and being cited as an example of good practice, which, bearing in mind an item on the agenda later on, which found shortcomings in the use of the Proactis database with various contracts not being fully following that process. I just wonder whether Audit Wales should reflect on that comment, and I would appreciate their observations.
I'm going to jump in on this one. I think I believe you're referring to another report that we've got on the agenda, which I have no knowledge of. I can only comment on what we found in this piece of work in terms of the Council's use of the Proactis database. And what we found is that the use of the database around being able to manage and record commissioned and contracted work, we found that to be good practice in this instance within the confines of the audit criteria we were applying.
Thank you, Duncan Mackenzie. Are there any comments from the room? Perhaps from Lisa, do you have any observations?
Nothing further.
No, nothing further to add. Thank you. I think Claire Blanchard was next, and then I call in.
Yeah, just a quick one. It's something Gareth said. He said, you needed to define what value for money means. Surely there is an Audit Wales definition that the whole sector is using with regards to what value for money is. Value for money should be a holistic term as opposed to something that's just unique to Flintshire. Just want to pick Gareth up on that.
But thank you, Claire. I'm sure that Gareth can include that observation when he looks at that. Councillor Shalcroft.
Okay.
And then I think we will close this item and go to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and I'll go back to item 101 again. We have a robust process tracking over 25k, but are we happy we have a robust process in place for those under 25k to enable good value for money? Sometimes we can overlook the financial opportunities when dealing with smaller financial numbers, but proportionally the financial opportunities could be higher.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Gareth, another point to consider for the next iteration?
I think I will need to take that one away and think about it, because there's a balance there, isn't there, between bureaucracy on small levels of spend that aren't going to achieve a bigger outcome. And I'll see if we can get some analysis of how much spend we have on low value contracts.
Because proportionally under 20, if it was 80% of your total, then could be big opportunity there that were maybe overlooked.
But thank you, Councillor Shalcroft. We're going to go now to the vote. We've had a proposition from Councillor Ellis, which has been seconded, that we defer, in effect, this item for further discussion pending Chief Officer bringing back an updated report, and that will follow CROSC, which is the Corporate Resources Committee, and the Cabinet's own considerations. So we'll have the full picture then, and hopefully that debate will be fairly short, because we've had a good airing today on this matter. So we've had the proposal, it's been seconded. Could I have an indication of all those in favour, please? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favour. Anyone against? No one's against. Any abstentions? We've got no abstentions, so that is carried. Thank you very much. So we now move on to the next agenda item, which is item number 7, which starts on page 91 of the pack, which is the letter from Adrian Crompton, Auditor General for Wales. And I'd like to hand over to Neil Cockerton, the Chief Officer.
Put it up. Good morning, everyone. Essentially, this letter sets the scene for further work in relation to statutory accounts, but also provides some analysis in terms of a backlog within the statutory account system. Interestingly, and very helpfully, it differentiates a position that is a national position, and then also focuses on Flintshire County Council's overall position, which within the letter at page 92 is a very positive and constructive comment from the Auditor General. If I may, Chair, I'll just read that out in full so people online can also note that. So Adrian Crompton advises that the backlog position described above does not apply to the Council, which has consistently produced timely, accurate and high quality accounts over the last 2 audit cycles. The Council has demonstrated strong and sustained performance, providing well-prepared draft accounts and comprehensive working papers provided within agreed deadlines, and responded promptly to audit queries. This reflects the ongoing commitment of the finance team and the wider Council to support an efficient and effective audit process, and I thank you for your continued support in this regard. I mean, clearly this committee and certainly the finance team play a crucial role in that, particularly the finance team who work incredibly hard with our colleagues in Audit Wales and have very strong working relationships with Audit Wales colleagues. And I think, to be quite honest, that plays out in the work we do with Audit Wales generally. So, I mean, without those relationships and that strength, I think we would do far less and achieve far less. What the Auditor General does ask, though, and the finance team are well in advance in terms of preparation of that, is in terms of page 93, and it's headed, "What am I asking you to do?" So there are some deliverables there that the Auditor General has asked of local authorities generally, and what he's asked of the Council. I don't believe that is presenting any particular risk or challenge to the Council and the finance team. Section 151 officer are clearly cited on it and acting on it. So I don't know whether there are any questions. I don't know whether you would wish for Gary or Chris to add any other comments in relation to that letter, Chair, but I have no further comments to make.
Well, thank you, Chief Executive. Before I open the floor, I'd like to extend our thanks and congratulations to Chief Officer Gary Ferguson, Chris Taylor and the team for what clearly is an excellent work in presenting accounts concisely, completely and timely. And I think we all ought to congratulate the team and have that formally recorded. So thank you very much. that reflects very well on the council. Sorry. Councillor Johnson, can I ask you to come in, please?
Thank you. Yes, I'd just like to echo the Chief Executive's comments on that. I think this is, well, it is brilliant, fantastic to go and see this written down in front of you. I think the finance team brings the way they work with with Audit Wales, the way they get on with this is absolutely fantastic. You know, I sometimes look at a cabinet member for finance and think, oh, how do you measure how good you are? And this is the sort of thing that really goes and says it. It says what the team are. And I don't really think that when I'm looking at this, it's just about the accounts. It's the approach that they go and take to everything financial within this council. Now, when I was made aware of this letter, I'll be quite honest and say it was nice to read it, but it came as no surprise. And I think this committee in particular will have noted that however long you've been on this committee, the way that the accounts are always prompt, accessible, that Gary and Chris are there and always able to answer the questions and take them away and do them. So there's no recommendation that goes with this. And I'm not a member of this committee, but I do think that just noting that comment in some way, either if it could be put in this email, this letter here, either if it could be put in the minutes, or if a member wishes to go and just make sure it was noted, I will be very grateful on behalf of the team who've done such excellent work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Johnson. So a suggestion there to sort of formally recognise the good work done by the finance team. I'm going to ask for any other comments and then perhaps round off with a opportunity to Gary Ferguson or Chris Taylor to respond with any thoughts of their own. So any other comments from anyone? No, everyone seems to be content with the letter, and so Gary or Chris.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Thanks for the very kind comments. I'm also, from my obviously pleased and indeed proud of our track record of the accounts, particularly the last couple of years. I think particular praise does need to go to Chris rather than myself. It's his team that brings together the accounts each and every year, alongside a vast number of individuals across the whole council. The challenge now, of course, is to maintain and indeed improve on that in future years. Just to assure members, our close down timetable for 25-26 accounts is already in train, and we are planning to submit the draft accounts before the 30th of June, in line with the intentions within the report. And also we've got a scheduled meeting of this committee before the end of September to hopefully formally approve the audited accounts. But obviously there's some codependencies there with ensuring that the audit is completed in conjunction with ourselves in advance of that. So thanks again.
Thank you very much. So there isn't a formal recommendation for this item, but perhaps we could just make sure the minutes note the committee's thanks to Gary, Chris and their teams. I think everyone's nodding. I don't think we need a formal vote on that. So thank you very much. So we now move on to the next item, which is item 8. Is the quarter 4 Treasury Management Report, which is going to be over to Chris Taylor, and it commences, if I can find it, on page 99 of our pack. So, Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. This report covers the 4th quarter Treasury Management position, which runs to February 26. This is only a short report, and there will be a full outturn report, which will be presented to a future committee in July. The main details of the report are supported in the 3 appendices attached. Starting with Appendix 1 on page 107, this shows the Council's investments at the end of February, which total 34.3 million, spread across 8 counterparties. Appendix 2 shows our long-term borrowing position of 336.8 million. Again, most of this remains with the Public Works Loan Board, and no new long-term borrowing was taken out this quarter. And Appendix 3 on page 113 covers our short-term borrowing at the end of February, which which there was 8 million of short-term loans outstanding across 3 counterparties. There is also a section in the report around the economic update provided by the Council's Treasury Management Advisors, along with narrative around interest rate forecasts. However, again, prior to this report being produced, the evolving situation in the Middle East has caused obviously significant market disruptions, and all inclusive adjusted their expectations around when bank rate interests will occur. They've also stated during this period there's likely to be more changes in their interest rate forecasts, which will be highly likely due to the evolving situation. As it stands, all in close expect bank rates to be held at 3.75% for the foreseeable future. And again, there's a possible range of scenarios against this due to the continuation of the war, any post-war conduct, any temporary or lasting damages to energy infrastructure. So in short, long-term rates are likely to stay as is, but probably more weighted towards the upside risk. And again, risk around long-term gilts will need to be considered because, again, they may be risked towards increasing rather than decreasing. Just on that, I've ran sort of the current estimates in terms of the levels around where we're projected to be. We don't think in Treasury terms there's a significant impact or any adverse impact in the short term. Any interest rates increases to borrow and offset from potential income we get in. Obviously, that's as it is today, and this is going to be a fluid situation. I'll have to monitor it as it continues and report back to the committee. So I've been taking the questions, Chair.
Right, thank you, Chris. Any comments or questions from members? No, everyone's silent. I'd like to ask some questions then, Chris, please, with regard to the appendices, Appendix 2 on page 109. Where we've got very lengthy loans outstanding of 40 or even up to 60 years. For example, at the top of the page, there are some loans which started in 88, which don't mature until next year or the year after, or 29, a 40-year period. And go halfway down the page, there's one which started in 1707-97. It's for 60 years at 7.13% interest. These are all high interest rates. When I know the interest rates, back in the day, were higher than they are now, but we've evidently committed ourselves for an extensively long period, which affects not only one generation, but 2 or 3 generations. And then moving on to page 110, there are, under the fixed rate annuity loans, there's 5.42%, 5.38%, again with 40-year periods. And what I couldn't see in here, because it's probably accounted for differently, but with the new homes funding, we've been told separately in a separate committee that there are there's a 50-year loan, for example, at 5.63%, which is the highest pretty much of all the schemes approved. And my question is twofold, really, is why do we commit to such long loan periods when the interest rates seem to be at the top of the market? And then secondly, is there any opportunity to renegotiate so that we're not committed to those rates for decades to come? Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, in relation to the sort of lengthy loans, obviously these were done years ago, and they were fixed in up to 50 years. Obviously, there's high interest rates there. We do negotiate or try to look at any sort of debt rescheduling for there. Again, most of these will come with high premiums rather than discounts, so you're paying to get out with them, which makes it harder. But we do discuss our debt maturity structure with all enclosed and where there is opportunity. So we will look where possible to restructure them. In terms of the long loan periods, if we look at more recent ones, we are straying away from that sort of 50-year sort of loans. More recent longer term loans have been sort of short to medium term, where we've taken out roughly around 10 to 12-year loans, where the rate or value at the minute's better rate, and it gives you more of that possibility around negotiating or even getting out of them rather than being fixed into that longer period. So we do look where possible to try and renegotiate the higher rate loans. Again, most of them do have higher discounts because that rates, higher premiums because the rates are so high. But now we tend to look at shorter loans as we go forward to give that flexibility as well, because like I said, the interest rates could change and it helps move out of that position.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I take the point about the old loans, because these are certainly before any of us were in the organisation at that time. But not all of these are old ones. There's one New Homes one, which was 744,000 over 50 years. Now that would have been in the last couple of years. And there are other under the fixed rate annuity loans, which were taken out in 24. So that's a year and a half or year and 3/4 ago, for 40 years. And again, it's 5-point-something%, which is much higher than the other annuity loans. And I'm just concerned that we are maybe locking ourselves into this long-term high interest rate.
Yeah, sorry, I missed the point on the new homes loans. These are usually built in against the business case in terms of each property. So the new homes board will look at a business case, look at the rental income over a period, and then it'll slot in with what they feel fits into that business case. So they tend to be a bit longer with new homes ones, because they'll generate the income from rental properties over that time. So because it's built in, they're there to secure property. Again, there's some liquidity around if needed, those properties come in house, or they are there to provide an asset over that period. So they're more specific than annuity ones, based on terms of them being ring fenced to new homes.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Gary, and then Gareth.
Thanks, Chair. Just to add to the new homes, we actually borrow on behalf of new homes, and then we apply a small additional margin. So there's a marginal additional income to the council arising from that particular arrangement as well.
Right, thank you, Gary. Gareth.
I think the thing with new homes was that because new homes charges affordable housing rents, the levels of income that they could generate from the properties to be built with the loans were quite low, and new homes, without breaching any commercial confidence, had to look at what they could do to reduce the level of loan payments to within the income that they would generate. So they elongated the period of the loan in order to bring the loan payments down to make them affordable during that lifetime. So that was a real challenge for them. And I know that Rachel Corbelli, who did the work with new homes at the time, found it quite challenging to get to enable new homes to be able to borrow and still afford the repayments.
Thank you, Chief Officer. So, are there any other comments? Councillor Johnson.
If I could, yes. You did raise the issues around the loans for, say, 1988, etc., and the high rates of interest. If you look at Appendix 2, you will see that after the one dated 28/09/95, there's a thick black line. Anything above that thick black line is an inherited loan, which would have come from either Clwyd County Council, from Delyn Borough Council, or Allen and Deeside Borough Council. So it's not even the fact that these are Flintshire loans, they're inherited Flintshire loans. And I think when you go and look at that, you can probably guess which ones were possibly from Clwyd County Council, given the size of them, because you are ranging in, you're looking at the range there, 181,000 to 101,740,000. There's quite a difference. So I think when we're looking at these figures, these aren't even loans that Flintshire had anything to do with apart from inheriting. And I do think that probably adds a little bit, an extra layer of complexity. Again, when you look at the regularity of figures, once you go past that black line, they're all in the millions, and you can see that these are quite clearly Flintshire loans. But just, I think that's an important point to remember. We inherit loans, which are a lot older than the council itself, and those loans were taken out by organisations like in 1988, the councils there would have had no idea that within 9 years later, they would be abolished. So they're making judgments about how they went and saw the situation. And again, for those of us with long memories, when you're looking back to the 9% rate there, let's not forget that was moving into the issues around the ERM and Black Friday. I think it was 1991. So we're coming to all of those issues there. We would have pushed those up, those interest rates up. So I think when we're looking at the rates of interest, perhaps sometimes we could perhaps invite somebody down from Colleague Cambridge to give us a history lesson of the economics of the late 1980s, early 1990s, to just inform the challenges that we had then.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson, for those comments. We now move to the vote, which is on page 99, which is that members review and endorse the Treasury Management 2025-26 quarterly update. I think I need a proposer for this. So, Councillor Shalcroft, a seconder, please. Anyone wish to second? Councillor Healy, all in favour? Raise your hands. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Vote carried. Thank you very much, and thank you, Gary and Chris, for your work and your comments on that item. So we're now going to have a shift in the agenda because Chief Officer of Education Claire Homard has joined us, and she has to leave for another meeting or venue shortly. So we're going to go to item 16, which is the adult community learning, North East Wales Audit Community Learning Partnership. It starts on page 263 of the pack. And if Claire is ready, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you, Claire.
Diolch Cadeirydd a barod a pawb. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for your latitude in allowing me to come a little bit early today because I need to get on the road to Conway. So I'm here to present the report of the recent Eston inspection in relation to our Adult Community Learning Partnership that we co-run with Wrexham County Borough Council. I hope you found the report informative. It gives you a clear overview of the inspection that was undertaken last November, and it is a very positive inspection, and obviously we are delighted with that. Eston described the partnership as strong, mature and effective, and as you can see there from the executive summary, again, a very positive comment about how all the providers work together in a committed network that really delivers for adult learners in the area. The positive outcome means that there is no requirement for any follow-up from Eston in terms of their regulatory activity, so we will continue to work through the recommendations that have been identified to further strengthen the work of the partnership. I think what is really worth noting, though, are the number of spotlights that Eston have highlighted as a very strong practice within this particular provision. Those of you that read school reports will also know this is a feature where Eston want to bring forward to the attention of all providers where there is effective work being undertaken. To have 4 spotlights actually is quite exceptional. So we were delighted that Eston recognised so many of the positive features of the work of this partnership. And as you can see there, they related to engaging families in the world of AI, independent living skills and the use of expressive arts, our family learning programme that many of our schools engage positively in, and actually how we structure our self-evaluation processes as well. I mean, most importantly, Estin recognised that we do know our own strengths as a partnership, but we also know areas where we need to improve further. And you know, it was very pleasing to see that they considered our approach to be so inclusive. So as you can see from the report, there were 3 recommendations for ongoing improvements: to evaluate the impact of the partnership's provision on learners' progress, to improve learner progress from community provision to vocational or skills provision at higher levels, and to encourage learners to use and develop their Welsh language skills in social and formal aspects of their learning, and increase the opportunities for learners to undertake their courses through the medium of Welsh or bilingually. But all of those areas we had actually identified as part of our own self-evaluation processes. So I hope that gives the committee some assurance. As you can see, there are 2 recommendations for you there. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to extend my thanks to the whole team that work in this partnership, but particularly to Joe Tincello, who is the partnership manager, who was the nominee through the Estin process. And from Flintshire's perspective, to thank Vicky Barlow, who is the senior manager who strategically oversees this piece of work. So, Chair, I hope that's sufficient for the committee, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Are there any questions or comments, observations from the committee, please? Claire Blanchard first, then Councillor Healy.
It's just a quick one. An excellent report, Arlerchog. I was just wondering how you're going to share that best practice amongst other providers, because you know those spotlights really are worth wider dissemination. I just wondered if you had a mechanism within the council to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
Oh, that's a very good question, Claire. Obviously, by Estin putting it in their report as a spotlight, obviously, that report is accessible, isn't it, through the Estin website. And I'm sure as we do, other providers will be looking at inspection reports undertaken in other parts of Wales to learn from that best practice. But yes, through our own mechanisms here within the portfolio, obviously we, as a senior team, obviously review the inspection report. We look at those aspects of good practice and, you know, would be looking to make sure that we are following that in all aspects of our work as a portfolio. But yes, and again, here it's on today's agenda, so it is accessible to other portfolios across the council. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Claire. I'm not repeating myself. There are 2 Claires here. Councillor Healy next, and then Councillor Carberry.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to celebrate 2 things. One, I can hear. I've got my hearing back. Secondly, in time to listen to Claire's report. So I'd certainly like to also celebrate this report and the achievements that are in it. It's just an excellent report. And I think comment was made on those 4 spotlights, which is an achievement. And I'd certainly wish to congratulate all involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Healy. Councillor Carberry.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to congratulate the adult community learning team and to ask that we had another recommendation in that we commend their work and celebrate their success.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to add my own thanks to Claire Homard and her team. It's clearly an excellent result. It reflects well on the council and the portfolio, and it benefits our residents in Flintshire. So, you know, well done to everyone. And I think we'll move to the recommendations, which we've now got 3. The first is that this committee receives the findings of the recent Estin inspection of adult community learning in Flintshire, which we've done. And secondly, that the Governance and Audit Committee are assured that the partnership has planning in place to respond to the 3 recommendations left by Estin, which we've heard from Claire Homard, have been accepted and will be actioned. And thirdly, that we commend the work and we celebrate success. I'm not sure how we celebrate it. Perhaps a tin of biscuits or something to the team, or however you think appropriate.
Chair, I did give flowers and gifts to those who would work so hard during that week. But I will certainly pass on your congratulations to our colleagues here in Flintshire and also in Wrexham, because this is very much a partnership approach.
Thank you very much. Could I have a proposer, please, for those 3 recommendations? Councillor Sharcroft, the seconder, Claire Blanchard on this occasion. Thank you very much. All in favour? Anyone against? Everyone's against. And any abstentions? I think that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. So you can go off to Conway. Thank you. Thank you very much, Claire. So we're now going to go back to the agenda to item 9, which is external regulation assurance. And it begins on page 115 of the pack. And the purpose of this item is to endorse the summary of all external regulatory reports received during 25-26, along with the Council's responses. And I'm going to ask the Chief Executive, Neil Cockerton, to present this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the legislative framework covering the submission of reports to Governance and Audit Committee set out in paragraph 101 of your report. Reports from external auditors, regulators and inspectors are reported into Governance and Audit Committee, and these are throughout the year. So what's in your pack in terms of the summary shouldn't be a huge surprise to you, because you'll have seen those as they land either within scrutinies or within Governance and Audit Committee, and predominantly Governance and Audit Committee as the last point of discussion. So what you have in there is the consolidated report, and it's prepared each year. The report before you this morning is an amalgam of all reports prepared. Appendix A provides an overview. I think in there are 27 individual reports, and the status has been red, amber, green in terms of RAG reports. Within your report, you'll note that 3 inspections have yet to be received. Note out there in train, and when they do land, they'll find their way through the normal process, scrutiny, cabinet, and into Governance and Audit Committee in due course. I'm not proposing to add any further comment, Chair, in relation to what's before you, but quite happy to answer any questions. And if Lisa's got anything further to add on the points I've raised, then she may wish to, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Perhaps I'll pass over to Lisa Brownbill.
Nothing further to add, really, Chair. It's as obviously self-explanatory in terms of the report. If there are any questions in more finer detail, I'm happy to pick anything up.
Thank you very much. So I'll open this to the floor then. Any comments from members at all? I don't see any hands raising. I'd like to ask a question then. On page 117, paragraph 1.08, it says that work is underway to improve the monitoring of external regulation reports. And it refers to going forward, there are certain actions that will be done, such as putting the recommendations into the in-phase system and reporting on a quarterly basis. That paragraph suggests to me that there have perhaps been some areas where we could have done things a bit either better or differently, and that we now recognise that and have a plan for doing things better in the future. That's how that reads to me. And when I look at the various amber items, which there are numerous ones, without going into the detail of all of them, it just looks that perhaps the recommendation on page, if I can find it, on page 116, I think, where it says, let's just find it. It's 115, isn't it? But to be assured by our response, I'm just wondering whether that's a little strong, whether perhaps we acknowledge the work being done, but perhaps we sort of recognise the concerns that some improvement has been needed. I don't know what others feel, or indeed if the officers would like to express any comments on that. Chief Executive.
Yeah, I think to take one paragraph out of context is probably doing the whole report a bit of a disservice. What we're saying there is, and no system's perfect, and we're reflecting there in that particular paragraph that you raised in relation to 108, that there are systems that we can use to tighten up the process, and in-phase is one of those things that we will be using. And that will create some transparency within the portfolios and allow us, in terms of Lisa's team particularly, to report more effectively, and also when reports have landed to make sure they're on the system and being monitored more effectively. So I think that is one comment in a range of comments within the whole report. It's quite, it's your call, Chair, whether you want to modify that recommendation, but I would caution that we don't want to take that out of context in terms of one paragraph, in terms of the whole number of reports. There are 27, broadly speaking, reports within there. So, let's contextualise it a little bit more around that.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Lisa, any additional comments?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Very much echo what the Chief Executive said. I think it's important to note that these reports are the responsibilities of the managers. They are working on them. We're not saying that they're not working on them. What we're saying is that we want to bring everything together in one place. So we've got that holistic view on what actions are. And the idea of our performance system is that they can see everything, any action, regardless whether it's council plan, risk management, anything actions that they will be able to see. So that's what we're trying to do. That's what it's work in progress. And it just means at the moment it's a very laborious task to collate that information. Whereas now, once it's on the system, it'll actually be more efficient for my team more than anything else, rather than the services.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Ellis, you've got your hand raised.
Thank you. It was just looking. Thank you, Chair. It's just looking at the appendix, and I note on page 126 the council is being asked to identify potential projects that could be delivered under the transformational change, and also about the strategy. And I note the answers there, but I'm just wondering, where are we at present with that, and will it be coming back, an update be coming back on the progress of that, the transformational strategy, and what's going on in the council? Because it makes reference, doesn't it, to the fact that we're under severe budget pressures of 29 million identified for 27-28. So I just think it's important that we're updated as progress is made. If that's okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ellis. As we have the Cabinet member responsible for transformational change here, I will ask Councillor Jones to respond.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think obviously the budget includes £2 million of benefit efficiencies that we're going to be finding. So it's really important that, in fact, Councillor Ellis makes a good point, that we've invested in the STP, the strategy, because for transformation, that strategy itself is something that we're working on, because we've, in the past, over the recent times, we've gone into transformation knowing certain things would be really easy to make efficient and to do better, making service delivery and improvements as we go along, but we've never had a kind of a corporate strategy towards it. So we're working on that. We've actually created a transformation program board right now, so that every chief officer can input into that, where we can monitor the amounts, any kind of slippage within projects. All these things give a bit more, if you like, impetus to make sure that that 2 million is going to be found in time for this budget. So I think all those things together just show a commitment to the transformation programme, so that we're definitely going to be there and thereabouts. So I think it should be some comfort to know that we've invested. We've also identified over the time, and I think that was borne out in the PPA as well, the panel performance assessment, that we needed a chief officer to do that, and that's something which we're working towards. So there's a lot of phases going on towards this, but we recognise that the transformation programme is going to be key to any budget in the future, but certainly the one in the next 12 months.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Ellis, anything you want to come back on that?
No, that's fine. I thank the Cabinet member. Can I just raise another issue, please, if that's okay, Chair?
Go ahead.
Page 129, again on an Amber response. We've got no dates of when we're coming back with the information. It's there's 3 areas relating to safeguarding and relevant agencies and strategy meetings, but we've got the response to say that there's a mapping exercise underway looking at social work vacancies, but we haven't got a date of when we'll get an update on that recommendation, if you like.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Lisa, will that be in the action tracking points of the internal audits?
Yes, we can do, Chair. I'm obviously, but the team will be chasing this information. This was available at the time of reporting to committee, so we will continue, which will be the benefit of having it on our system then, because that information will be part of when they load the data on in the first place.
So that makes it
easier
to pursue going forward.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis, for raising that. I think we're now moved to a vote. We haven't had a proposition yet. Would someone like to either propose the suggested recommendation on page 115, isn't it? Which is to be assured by our response to external regulatory reports, or if anyone wishes to express a different worded recommendation, please speak up now. So we've got silence at the moment. Would someone
propose it as it is?
Thank you, Councillor Healy. Councillor Healy is proposing as it is, and Councillor Sharpcroft is seconding. So can we please move to the vote? All in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? So thank you, that's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. So we're now going to move to the item 10, which is the annual audit summary for the council for the last financial year, or the last year. It starts on page 161 of the pack. And the purpose is to receive the annual audit summary from the Auditor General and note the Council's response. And I'm going to pass over to the Chief Executive to present the report, please.
Just to say, I've got to leave right now, but I appreciate the allowing me to speak throughout the committee. That was very nice. Thank you.
You thank you, Councillor Jones. So, Chief Executive.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the report before you from Audit Wales, it's the 6th annual report. I'd first of all draw your attention to page 169, which is the what's termed your audit at a glance, a very useful page within the report, which provides a very helpful summary there and talks about the recommendations made, performance, and qualified opinion, and of course the part we've touched on earlier in terms of the advanced statutory deadline, in terms of the accounts being presented in advance of that date. Moving through the document, page 170 talks about accuracy and of preparation, that the Auditor General didn't find any material weaknesses in internal controls. Council's annual governance statement prepared in line with CITFA code, and the Council's accounts are properly prepared and materially accurate, and issued an unqualified audit opinion. The final point I want to draw your attention to is page 172, which sort of brings together some performance audit findings. One is oversight of partnerships, and one in relation to transformation. Councillor Ellis has drawn attention to that in the previous report in terms of transformation and the oversight of partnerships as a report that you'll have seen as a committee. I'm not proposing to go through any further elements within the report, Chair, but quite happy to take any questions. And if Lisa, I don't know whether Lisa wanted to add anything before any questions are presented.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I'll come on. Nothing further from Lisa, so I'll go straight to Councillor Healy, please, who's raised his hand.
Thank you. It's not a question, but I think as a committee, we're going to really applaud what has been done here and what has been achieved. At one stage, I thought, we've had this report before, but I think that must have been the annual report for last year, which was equally impressive. And what you can see is on page 169, your audit at a glance, which just gives you a snapshot of how good we have been as far as responding and dealing with the inquiries and all the rest of it. It's saddening to see that across Wales, it was only 56% of local authorities that met the deadline for submitting their accounts, and that only 9 out of the 22 authorities were certified on time. But of course, we tick all the boxes. And I really think we should, as a committee, commend the officers who've been involved in this, because we're doing this against a backdrop of low funding, which affects our staff capacity and ability to do things. And this, of course, allows me to comment on the fundamental cross which we carry as a local authority in relation to several other authorities, many of which have failed to meet the deadline, which we do suffer terribly from being a low-funded authority because of a Welsh government formula that is not just broken, but it is assessed in the wrong way by giving responsibility to the local authorities to decide on it, so that the big boys at the top vote in favour of the status quo, whereas in several other European countries, it's an independent body that decides how the cake is shared. And that, I think, is our fundamental problem. But we have done extremely well in this respect, in spite of it.
Thank you, Councillor Healy. I think that's more comments than questions, which is fine. But I don't think there's a question to be answered. There was that. But it's an observation and well put. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to the Chief Executive. And yes, what I highlighted is again on the previous agenda item, is again highlighted on page 169 and 172 in relation to transformation. It's outlining that the council basically are under severe pressure, like Councillor Healy said, and we've got £29 million budget gap for 27-28, and that our approach is still, despite what Councillor Jones has said, it's still fairly short term. So I suppose we need assurances that the programme will enable the council to respond to the budget pressures that we've got. And I think somewhere along the line we need to make note of that, if that is okay, and have updates how it's progressing. If that question is okay with you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ellis. I I can't see anyone else's hand raising at this point, so I'd just like to throw in my observations that this report to me looks a little bit like the curate's egg. But there's clearly fantastic work being done by the accounts team, and that is recognised. We've recognised it in the previous item, and we recognise it again here. And then on page 172, I think it is, we've got reference to the oversight of partnerships, where it says lacks a corporate approach to managing all its partnerships, and transformation approach is short-term, does not provide assurance that the programme will enable the council to sustainably respond to the budget pressures it faces. We've heard the cabinet member explain that on the transformation, that's a progress in train, and that there are measures in place to speed up the transformation change programme. But nevertheless, we are looking at this Auditor General's summary, which does express some concerns. We've heard about the financial pressures that the council faces, and a suggestion from Councillor Ellis that perhaps the wording of the recommendation should be tweaked to reflect that overall position, because it currently reads, the committee is assured by the content and observations of the Auditor General. And I think if sort of reading the room, perhaps this ought to be amended slightly, that the committee recognises the financial pressures the council faces. And I'm just thinking out loud how we sort of express this, but perhaps assured is perhaps not quite the right word. Perhaps we either note the content and observations, or perhaps there's another adjective which we can put in there which isn't quite so bland. If anyone has any suggestions, but do I get the feel of a room right, or am I barking up the wrong tree? Councillor Healy.
I feel we have to acknowledge the financial pressures. I think that has to be in the wording. If we don't like the word assured because of the financial pressures, now I can understand that, but I'm reluctant to have our compliments congratulating the officers on completing the exercise so well. I'm reluctant to have that watered down. And if assured isn't the right word, then maybe the committee recognises the financial pressures that the council is under, but nevertheless congratulates the officers on completing, I don't know, the necessary work which got a sound Auditor General's audit report. I don't know, I'm struggling a bit, I'll admit.
I think we all are, Councillor Healy, because we don't want to detract from the great work that's being done by the finance team, but we don't want to equally paint a false picture that everything's rosy when we know we face severe challenges. And I think that's trying to get that right balance without any criticism of anyone. It's just reflecting reality. So let's have a go then. Yeah, Chief Executive.
If it helps, maybe you keep the sentence, but add something, add a little bit more onto that says audit summary report 2025, but also notes the financial comments within the report, or words to that effect.
Okay, let's do that. So the recommendation is, and I will propose this, that the committee is assured by the content and observations of the Auditor General for Wales's annual audit summary report 2025, whilst recognising the financial pressures of the council and the findings of the Auditor General. Does that sound? So Councillor Healy has seconded that.
That's second.
Thank you very much. All in favour? Anyone against? No No one against? Any abstentions? No abstentions. Thank you very much. So we move on to the next item. I'm just looking at the time here. I'm just wondering whether we ought to take a 10-minute break. Yes, we'll do that. We'll take a 10-minute comfort break and come back at 12 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So you will receive this every year. We are required as part of the Global Internal Audit Standards to prepare an internal audit strategy and an audit plan. And for this one, it covers the period 2026 to 2029. The plan produced complies with those requirements within the standard. In particular, within sections 1 to 6 of your strategy, you have areas of where it's the purpose and the objective of the service, the roles and responsibilities of and the scope of the service, the resource management, performance and reporting arrangements. So each section of that strategy takes you through how we are going to deliver those elements. The latter part of the strategy is the plan, and that's a 3-year plan. Within there, it takes you how we've identified the plan, who we've consulted with. Each portfolio chief officer has been met with. We've discussed where relevant with department services, and then obviously we consult on whether it's reduced in relation to risk, system base, and any sort of advisory pieces of work. I'm happy to take any questions. There is, as you would appreciate, resources limited within the team. So it is a smaller plan than previous years. However, it is a coverage across all of the portfolios. So I'm satisfied that we still have sufficient resource to cover all of those. What I would say is that the plan will be flexible going forward, as it is every other year. We will meet with chief officers on a quarterly basis to review. And then if there's any new reviews that come in during the year in order to respond to risk, we will do that, and that plan will be updated on an ongoing basis. So it will be a fluid plan, but that's how we manage it on an every other year as well. Happy to take any comments or questions.
Right, thank you, Lisa. Sorry, over to you from Audit.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say, I don't know if it's just me online, but I could hear Lisa, but then when you started talking, I couldn't hear anything that you were saying. So I thought I should point that out.
Same here.
Right, thank you. That was my fault. My red light wasn't on. So all I had said was that I am sure that we all recognise the excellent work that Lisa and her team does on the internal audit work. Particularly given the limited resources that she's got, but she's explained that she's able to cover all portfolios and regularly keeps the audit plan up to date. And I just asked if there were any comments or observations from the floor that would like to be raised. I don't see any, so I think we move then straight to the recommendations. Lisa will be relieved, which is on page 177, is it? Which I don't think I'll read it all out because it's there for you to read yourself. But just to highlight the So shortened version for those who are observing online, but the first recommendation is requested to consider the Flintshire internal audit strategy and audit plan and to make comments on its content. And then secondly, the committee is required to approve the Flintshire internal audit strategy and audit plan for 26 to 2029. So we haven't actually made any comments other than to express our thanks to Lisa and her team and to recognise the work that she does, but everyone has had the opportunity to make comments. So I'm comfortable that we can put forward those recommendations. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Healy, seconder. Councillor Sharcroft, all in favour? I think that's unanimous. Anyone against? No one against. Any abstentions? None. Thank you, Lisa. That was a painless item. So we move on to item 12, which is the Governance and Audit Committee Self-Assessment Action Plan Review. And this begins on page 203 of the meeting pack. And again, this will be for Lisa to present. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. So as you'll remember, we had a workshop for the Governance and Audit Committee where you sat and assessed how effective you were as a committee. Following that, we presented a report in October to committee on the actions that you jointly wanted to take forward. This is an update to that action plan. So I had agreed that we would bring it back mid-year. I am pleased to say that all of the actions have been implemented. What we would need to do is just make sure that they continue to be implemented, given that, you know, the change in current chair situation at the moment, particularly in relation to the meeting with the leader. So we need to do that. And if there are any other actions that you would like to be included in the action plan, then I'm happy to update it as well.
Right, thank you, Lisa. So are there any comments or any items to be added to the action plan people feel are needed? So anyone want to say anything? Councillor Sharcroft.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, you know, everything looks great. We've all got green everywhere, and I'm just one confirmation really that we've got everything in place to maintain that, because once you get there, it's quite hard sometimes to keep it going. So
yes, I suppose that the only difference now is that we've had we will have a change, so we need to reintroduce that control in terms of meetings, but I can pick that up going forwards.
How frequently will we revise it? Is it just yearly or?
So the next time we will have again the annual assessment. So we'll go through this action plan, go through assessment again. We may have new members, so we'll obviously look at how they feel against the assessment. Are there any skills training that needed? And then we'll revise the plan. So we'll keep it on a rolling basis, but update it again following the next self-assessment. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Sharcroft, and thank you, Lisa. So in the absence of any other questions, we'll go to the recommendation on page 203, which is that the committee considers the action plan and reaches a decision on whether any further information is needed. I think that Lisa has addressed that in that the action plan will be reviewed. But apart from the aspects which she's mentioned, we haven't come up with any further suggested changes. So if everyone is comfortable with that, could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Sharcroft, a seconder. Councillor Healy, all in favour? Everyone's in favour. Any objections? Or anyone against? No. And any abstentions? No abstentions. So that's passed. Thank you. So we now go on to item 13, which is the internal audit progress report. And this is starting on page 211. And it will be presented by Lisa again. And we have Sharon Carney, HR manager. That's probably not your title, Sharon, but sorry. And we have Katie Wilby, the Chief Officer for Street Scene, which is the correct title because I can see it on the screen. So over to you, Lee. Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. Are you happy, Chair, for me to leave the two reports till the very end, so we go through the rest of the report and then we finish on the two reports?
Yes, that's fine.
That brings in the officers. Okay. So if I just start with, obviously, progress report that we bring on a quarterly basis. Within your report, you will see, obviously, there are, the reports that we've issued, and they're summarised in your appendices. I think probably the most important thing to note is the action tracking that has seen a number of actions, both live and overdue actions, are reduced this time, including those that are high priority. So that's a really positive progress. And you will see more details within them within Appendix 6, 7 and 8 of your report. Appendix 10 shows the performance of the service, and both performance indicators are currently green. Appendix 11 shows you the current plan of where we are in terms of closing those reviews down. Everything's on track in terms of the revised plan, so we will update that in the annual report in June. If the report has been deferred, that's again noted in your Appendix A11 of your report. And I think we've touched on it earlier, but within this, within my progress updates, since my last report, we had 1.6 FT vacancies. I've now gone up to 2.6 FT vacancies, which equates to 46% of my service. So there is a large proportion vacant. However, we do have an advert out which is due to close on the 29th of March, not April. So I'm hoping, very much hoping, that we can appoint 2 senior auditors to that position. And then we will obviously work on the job description in relation to the preventative fraud post for later. Happy to take any questions on those. If not, I'll go on to the other.
Let's just pause there before we
Yeah.
go on to the specific reports and have any questions or comments from anyone, please. I don't see anyone. I'd just like to ask a question on page 218, where there are a number of audits referred to as advisory. And I'd just like to have clarification on what that level of assurance means.
So advisory is it's a number of different reviews that we do. It could be data analysis, it could be as a specific project. In these particular ones, it's where it's been requested for us to undertake a review. Obviously, you'll see there are 2 that which are the notices of motions, which we've completed, an investigation report, and 1 on Flint High School. So where recommendations, we don't make recommendations formally within the reports of advisory, and we certainly don't track them. However, if there are anything that is within there, then it's the responsibility of the service to take it forward. Okay, so there may be some recommendations, but we don't track them.
So I suppose the question is the outcome. I mean, these are not scored then, sort of red, amber, green, like the other audits are. So we don't really know from this report what the level of assurance is.
We don't give them a level of assurance. That's the whole nature of the advisory piece of work. So there may be some findings for the services to take forward, but it's more of a consultancy piece of work. So we go into a lot more finer detail, and usually it's quite a large piece of work that we do. But no, we don't report in that sense, but how obviously the service and the chief officers now have a copy of all advisory reports coming through for each of their meetings. That is just how we split the pieces of work.
So how would members become aware of the outcome of those reports?
So if there was something in that report that should be reported to their overview and scrutiny, as it would be for an amber, red or a red report, I would expect that to be taken forward. And that's something that probably is discussed at the Chief Officer's team going forward, is where it needs to go next and what needs to happen to it.
Right, so it's a discussion with the Chief Officers, with the Chief Executive.
Yeah, just to clarify, that the reason that they now come into Chief Officer team is to ensure there's some consistency and that we have visibility of all reports within specific portfolios that have been called in as an advisory report. And what we can do there as well is we can also map across in terms of trends. So there's a number of things that will happen from this point on. I mean, essentially, advisory reports were requested by portfolios and they rested with portfolios. So we may not necessarily, as a management team, be aware of some of the outcomes of those. But the control process that is now in place sees those reports coming into COT, Chief Officer Team, and being analysed. And if there is a view collectively within COT that they need to go further, they will be moved into a more formal reporting process.
Through the scrutiny committees or whatever?
Through scrutiny committees, through Cabinet, or through Governance and Audit Committee as a final point in a process.
Right, thank you, Chief Executive. So those audits have been completed, Lisa?
Yes.
That's done. Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions or comments on that part of? Councillor Ellis.
Well, thank you, Chair. It's just for clarification, please. On the appendix on page 246, where it's got high priority actions, are we then to assume that all this will go back to scrutiny? Because some of the dates are up, aren't they? Like, for instance, reference 3695, that is due in March. So will all these go back to the appropriate scrutiny committees, or will they come back to us? Because not all of the updates are complete, if that makes sense.
Sorry, Chair, we're going to cover those reports in
the second part, right? Okay, but that's just what I needed to know. Just if do they go back to us or scrutiny? Sorry if I've jumped the gun. Sorry.
No, thank you, Councillor Ellis. We'll hold those questions in the air, as it were, and we'll now move on to the specific audits. Lisa, would you like to continue?
Thank you, Chair. Let me just get to the correct place now. So if we start with the review that we undertook on street scene in relation to compliance with contract procedure rules, I am aware that it's obviously already gone to the relevant overview and scrutiny committee and to Cabinet. So that's really positive progress that's been made, because that's what we would ask to happen as part of this process. For just some context then, I'll just put my glasses on. So this review was requested by the Chief Officer for street scene. We were to look at the procuring contracts, whether they're robust and consistent, whether budgets are being effectively managed and in compliance with CPRs. It was a known risk at the time that not all street scene contracts weren't reflected within the Proactis, and therefore we didn't feel that that was an area that we needed to look at, because otherwise it would be of little value. It was something that they already were aware of. One of the other areas that the Chief Officer asked us to look at was in relation to aggregated spend to be included in the review. So we looked at over 2 years worth of data. We looked at regular and repeated spend with suppliers and evaluated whether they've been procured appropriately and contract through Proactis. In particular, we focused on overall contracts spend is controlled within the service. We evaluated the efficiency and effectiveness of the procurement process for each service area and how those contracts were being procured, established whether the process for how those contracts are managed, reviewed how those contract risks are managed, mitigated and managed. We reviewed how contract spend is monitored for individual contracts and identified the contract management roles and responsibilities across the service itself. From that review, we identified there were 8 areas where we identified areas for improvement. Those related to the Proactis system itself, quick quotes in relation to the system for contracts over 20,000, quick quotes relating to the service itself over 20,000, the procurement action plan which is kept within the service, spend against contract work, aggregated spend, risk management and contract management and reporting, and those are all detailed within the report. It's quite a lengthy report, so I wasn't proposing to go through to the report in as detail as much. However, what I would say is obviously Following on to this, there is a further action plan which the Chief Officer has presented to overview the scrutiny committees. I just need to put a slight caveat on that. I appreciate that obviously they've been marked as implemented for most of them. We haven't had the opportunity to have a look at any of that data yet. So from an internal audit perspective, we haven't been able to say whether they've been completed yet. But I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to do that in due course. But I'm happy to hand over to the Chief Officer to take us through any of the questions anybody has.
Right, so Katie Wilby, Chief Officer Street Scene, is online. First of all, Katie, do you have any points or comments you want to add to that before I ask the committee for questions?
Good morning, Bore da, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Yes, I would like to add to that. And I think, you know, one of the key things I want to point out is I asked for this audit. I was getting, you know, I wasn't getting the assurance I was seeking from all the officers and all the services within my portfolio. A lot of the key management information from practice, the system that we use was missing. I don't get, you know, when you log into the system, there are no dashboards. I can't produce reports myself. So we have to request this. And also I was aware that there was an inconsistency in approach across the portfolio in relation to procurement and contract management. You'll note from the report that, you know, some of the other procurement exercises through things like park advert, transport, trunk road were excluded from the audit, and that's because they're visible to me. You know, I had that assurance in respect to transport services, trunk road services, because I can see it. But unfortunately, not all of the services were visible, which is why I asked for the audit. So we excluded transport and trunk road particularly. I asked for aggregate spend to be included. Audit found that a number of repeat works or similar types of services were being repeatedly at low values, would be repeatedly procured. So, you know, one of the risks that was pointed out, well, if we've got all our eggs in one basket with one supplier, you know, that's a risk for us as an organisation. You know, what do we do if that supplier is dissolved or goes into liquidation? A lot of this was covered at scrutiny. You'll see in the action plan, we have implemented quite a lot of the actions. As soon as we became aware, you know, of the outcome of the audit, we put this action plan in place in December. We have updated the Pentana system as well and uploaded documents, Lisa, so that you can see that we have actually actioned them. We now get quarterly reports from procurement, which are detailed within the action plan. From next month, we're stopping the use of quick quotes altogether within my portfolio, and we're working with procurement to actually produce a new template for the use of quotations. It won't be a full tender exercise, but it will ask some basic questions around insurance and health and safety questions of suppliers. So every time someone requests a quote, they will have, you know, those suppliers will have to fill in some basic information. So it won't just be as straightforward as a quick quotes, but it means that I will have the ability to run a report subsequently and get that data back to seek that assurance that we weren't getting. So a lot of the actions have been done. There were some actions that weren't completed, and that included the training for all officers. We've given ourselves till November because it's quite onerous. We've got a high number of officers that are going to have to go through the CPR training, which is the contract procedurals, and also training on Proactis. And we have from this month also got a new procurement business partner who's on board as well. I don't think there's anything further to add other than what I've already said, so I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. Any questions for Katie or Lisa? No one's raising their hands. I'd like to just say a few things. Firstly, I'm sure we would all applaud Katie Wilby as the Chief Officer for instigating this audit. That's exactly the right thing to do. And she is to be applauded for that, and I want to place that on record. I don't think we need go into too much detail into the specifics of this, because it has been thoroughly considered by the Scrutiny Committee and indeed by Cabinet, and the actions are being are being monitored by Lisa's team. So I think any comments we have should be at a fairly high level, which is appropriate that we are sort of governance and audit committee rather than going into the minutiae. But I just want to ask that the Actuaries system, as I understand it, is a centralised system for procurement. So presumably it's not just street scene which uses it. Is that correct? Yeah. In which case are the sort of shortcomings identified in the audit, possibly are going to be, similar shortcomings in other portfolios that need to be explored? That's my first question. And secondly, as I understand it, your audit was looking at the compliance with the procedures of the contract CPR rules. Did it actually look at whether there was any fraud or loss? Because if you're looking at procedures, it might detect whether those procedures are being complied with, but it wouldn't necessarily detect whether there had been financial loss. And I'm interested just to explore those 2 points with you, Lisa. Thank you.
In relation to the first point, yes, you're right, it's a central system. 2 points, the report was shared with the Chief Officer's team and they were tasked to go away and have a look at the report and look at their own service areas. A couple of the Chief Officers have already come back to me to ask for further information, so I know that is happening. And then the other point is that Proactus themselves have been in contact following, I think, probably the press and the publication, to see how they can support us as well, to see if there's anything else that they can do on the system. So we will obviously be taking that forward.
So will that be part of the internal audit programme to look at the other portfolios?
Not at the moment, only because we know what the issues are. For us, a general point, we do have another review as procurement for next year, so we can tailor that to see, once we know what the initial piece of work has been done from each of the chief officers, we can tailor that scope to see if there's any further work that we need to do. So there is one in. So
watch next year's procurement audit. Yes. So all the other portfolios are on warning then, aren't they? Or on notice to make sure they are complying. Okay, thank you for that. And what about the potential for financial loss?
So that's quite a difficult one to answer because of the scope of the review. We were purely looking at the compliance, and that was quite a very detailed review. What we would say, because of the systems that we have in place and how we manage it between the actual contract value and the spend, it would be difficult to demonstrate that at the moment, which is what the recommendations were.
So the jury's out on that. Okay. Any comments from anyone else? So obviously, from a sort of governance point of view, we are concerned about the potential for financial loss. And because the nature of the audit wasn't to look into the detail of that, it was to look at the procedures, we aren't quite sure whether there has been financial loss or not. If that's my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I'm just wondering how we respond to that. Whether any further analysis is required, or any thoughts, Lisa?
Can I just confirm we weren't suggesting that there was any inappropriate spend? It was just about how we procured the activity and how we then managed the spend going forward, but it wasn't inappropriate in that sense or fraudulent.
Right. Katie, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in, and this was obviously asked at scrutiny as well. And I did confirm that, the audit wasn't intended to do that, and Lisa's just outlined that. But in testing, there was no inappropriate spend found. Equally, since I implemented the action plan, we now get monthly transaction reports of all supplier spend. So we are monitoring that as well internally ourselves on a monthly basis. So I can see it, whereas previously we weren't getting those reports. So we are monitoring it very, very closely. I suppose from an audit perspective, this, I suppose in terms of compliance with CPRs, and if we're not complying with that, how can we demonstrate that we're getting value for money was one of the aspects that came out in scrutiny. So that's was my intention as well. If we're not following the procedures, how can I demonstrate and mitigate the risk that we are achieving best value for money. So that was one of my intentions behind the audit, and hopefully that is shown, you know, in terms of the action plan now. We're getting those reports now on a monthly basis. We're tracking it. And I know that obviously the audit plan with future audits will identify things around financial loss and fraud in the future. So we'll be able to look into that in more detail going forward.
But thank you, Katie. Is our members sufficiently assured to move on, or do you want to pursue that further? Councillor Shalcroft.
Oh, thanks, Chair. I just, if I can ask Katie a question. Obviously, after a few months when this new way of working is embedded, could we have a report back to see if there's any, you know, tangible improvements financially or otherwise? Thank you.
Katie?
Yeah, I mean, obviously this was around compliance with CPRs. I'm quite, you know, prepared to bring back to scrutiny, a further report, but obviously I'd need audit support to do that piece of work to check for compliance. She's essentially auditing me and my portfolio, so I can't be gamekeeper and poacher in one place. So although we're monitoring it and mitigating the risk, we would need support from audit to do that piece of work for us. So that's maybe something for Lisa to do, but I'm quite prepared obviously to bring back a further report in terms of progress on the actions. That's no problem at all.
Councillor Sharcroft, were you looking at more?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect you to carry out any substantial work, but I just wanted you to let us know how you were getting on. That's all. You know, it doesn't have, I don't want you to create work in any way. Thank you.
So is this something which we want, or is it a matter for CROSC, the Corporate Resources Committee? I'm just wondering, seeking views. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. I attended the Overview and Scrutiny Committee environment where Katie spoke, and I think she gave in-depth explanation, and maybe anything that goes back should go back to that Scrutiny Committee, which covers the portfolio. But again, like everyone else, I commend Katie for the actions that she took, and I thought what she actually explained at that committee was very, very well put, and I think anything should actually go back, and then if there are any issues, the Scrutiny Committee can refer to us, can't they, to this committee?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ellis. Lisa, you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I've just obviously I think it's appropriate for you to go back to the Overview and Scrutiny. They're responsible for that particular service. Where your assurance will come in is the action tracking. So if we've reviewed it and we've closed the actions down, then we're satisfied that those actions have been implemented, which gives you the assurance.
Okay, thank you for all those comments. Let's move on then to the next audit, internal audit, which I believe is the overtime. Lisa.
It is, thank you, Chair. So this review was undertaken on employment-related costs in relation to overtime. For context, overtime is worked where it exceeds 37 hours in the working week. There is an additional payments policy in place which expects all overtime to be approved in advance of being worked and must be related to specific time. It must be specific time limited and not be open-ended. So our review looked at a period in time and identified some areas where we thought there was further work that needed to be addressed. We identified that some improvements need to be related to the additional payments policy in terms of certifying officers and those authorising claims, and that reporting of overtime is to go to Overview and Scrutiny Committee and just a review of their risk management arrangements. Now, I appreciate the risk management arrangements. They've confirmed that they're satisfied with those, so I'm absolutely fine with that. But I'll hand over to the service manager, Sharon.
Good afternoon, all. Again, this was a report that I requested, bizarrely, but I have a knack of doing these things. So obviously HR don't control the spend, it's the portfolios, and we are audited very frequently in terms of payroll process. so accuracy and everything else. So I asked for audit to go to the services to see were they complying with the policy, because it's almost too late at the time it gets to payroll. It's been approved, we have to pay it. So this was about that kind of first step. Overtime, as the report indicates, we have reference to overtime in the additional payments policy. There is a small reference to it in the single status agreement. And it is also, we have policies on standby, called out, called on and sleep-ins, but we don't have a definitive overtime policy. And that was the overwhelming finding. So we have a new policy in draft, which kind of tightens the approval processes, as you would expect. I will need to consult with the recognised trade unions and get their approval on that before we can move that forward. It is really important to know, and I think it vaguely touches on it in the report, my team send monthly reports to every portfolio and all of their spend. So they get a report that will say what is being spent on overtime, what is being spent on additional hours, on standby, and everything else, so they can see that level of spend. They're all governed, of course, by financial procedure rules, which state that they should only spend within their budget allocation. The bit where there seems to be a slight disparity, and hence the red, I think, concerns from audit, is that whilst we do have authorised officers to sign off for payroll, so there's different levels. Some people are authorised to submit a timesheet. Some people are authorised to chain contracts, and there's a different profile, but that's not necessarily linked to budget holders with finance. So that's the cross-check that audit have recommended that we do, and that we only accept submissions from people who are accountable from a finance perspective. So that's the piece of work that we're doing. And then the other really helpful, I think, again, we've got a very complex time trend feed that comes into the system. There are about 200 different elements that comes into that. And what audit colleagues tell me is when they spoke to the services, whilst they're completing those time trend submissions, they're not keeping locally the reasons for the overtime. And we want to see the reasons for the overtime so we can try and triangulate it. So, for example, if it were, I'll pick on street scene because Katie sat here, if it said it was all for sickness and there was a low sickness record, absence, we'd challenge that. Or if a service said it was all for vacancies and they didn't have vacancies, that's the level of detail that we don't have and that we're seeking to get from the improvements that we're looking to put in place. So happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. Any questions from the committee? No questions at all. Well, first of all, thank you, Sharon, and for initiating this audit, rather like Katie did for the CPR in a contract rules audit. So, and I think we all ought to applaud you for taking that initiative. I suppose in the absence of sufficient documented processes is a concern. And that the various portfolios haven't been, doing basically what they should do. So if my reading is correct, the overtime budget is about 2 million per annum, roughly, give or take.
Finance colleagues come in. I don't believe there's a budget at all for overtime. I think the spend is quite high. So I think the spend that is outlined in here was limited to a couple of services. I think the actual the overtime spend is considerably higher than that. And that's the reason that I requested the audit. So if we have overtime, we have additional hours. So we have a lot of our employees who are not contracted as full-time. So say somebody was contracted to work 20 hours, if they worked up to 37, that's not classed as overtime, it's additional hours. Overtime is only if it's over 37 hours. So it's a complicated mix. So it may be that we do a more detailed report to scrutiny. I think that's where we got in discussion with audit. Those that attend overview, corporate resources overview and scrutiny will know that I regularly report on absence data and agency spend. Yeah. We will now incorporate some details around the employment related costs. So all this other ancillary spend that's over and above salaries, because I think it will be helpful to have that clarity.
Yes, thank you. I read somewhere in the report from April 25 to October 25, 988,000, which is 6 months. So I'm sort of extrapolating to about 2 million spend in a full year, which is up from 1.6 million in 2024. So it's a big chunk of money, isn't it? So it's good to hear. I think that there's going to be more detail of that going to scrutiny. I think that's very important. So as we've done with the previous item, we can restrict our sort of scrutiny, if that's the right word, to looking at the actions that have been completed, which we will do in future meetings. So I think we're at the point of going to the recommendation, which if someone can point me to the right page, please. I'll just read it out. 211, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. So the recommendation is to consider and accept the report. Very simple recommendation. So you could have read it out. Could I have a proposal, please? Councillor Sharp, seconder. Councillor Healy, all in favour? Anyone against? No one against. Any abstentions? No abstentions. So that's carried unanimously. And thank you again to forgive me for getting your title wrong, Sharon. I guess you're used to that, and to Katie as well, and again for initiating those audits, and to Lisa's team for carrying them out. Thank you. So that's item 13 done. We now move on to the action tracking, which is item 14, and it starts on page 253. So I'm going to ask Lisa again to present this report.
Thank you, Chair. So action tracking is a combination of all of the actions that you have raised during your committees, and this is a summary of those that are either outstanding or giving you an update of what's happened to them since. I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Healy.
Thanks. At the is your microphone not on? So?
Okay.
At the risk of being a total bore, obviously from the action tracking, or for the, sorry, I'll leave it till the forward work programme. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Any other items? I've got a couple of points, but I'll wait to see if anyone else has got. No. At the meeting in January, at our meeting in January, we agreed to put on the forward work programme scrutiny and governance arrangements of the investment zone. And I know we're coming on to the forward work programme next, but as an action point, I didn't see that addressed or recorded. And then there's almost action in reverse that at one of the education committee meetings, education scrutiny meetings, it was the 23rd of October, there was a recommendation passed regarding the Gwechler business plan to express concern to this committee about the absence of a financial plan and risk analysis. And I'm not sure that concern has been expressed to this committee. And I wanted just to check whether that had been. So Lisa, could you able to comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So apologies, I've missed the investment zone, so I will put it on the action plan, but I will obviously certainly find out when that will be. In relation to Gwechler, I did receive an email this week from Kerry. I think she copied you in. She'd apologised that it had been missed, raising this particular issue. However, I believe it's going to overview scrutiny on the 26th, the actual business plan and financial. So we were just going to wait until whatever came out of this committee today to see what you wanted to do. But maybe it'd be worth waiting until you see what's in the committee in that financial plan.
Fair enough.
Forward,
thank you.
That's okay.
So that has been passed on.
I picked it up. Yeah. Yes.
Lovely. So are there any other comments on the action plan or action tracking, please? I don't see any. So we'll go to the recommendation on page 253, which is to accept the report. So can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Healy, seconder. That's Claire, isn't it? Claire Blanchard, secondly. Thank you. Put my glasses on. All in favour? Anyone against? None. Any abstentions? None. Thank you. So that's passed unanimously. So we now go on to the forward work programme, which is page 257. And again, this will be over to Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. So this, obviously, this report just identifies the work that you've got for the up and coming year. As you expect, there is movement within the forward work programme where new reports come in or where resources present prohibit us from producing that report at a certain time. Any movement in the forward work programme is noted in 103 of the report, and then attached as the appendix is the actual forward work programme for the year. So I will make a note to go away and include that investment zone when I find out which committee it's going to come to.
Thank you. So any comments, questions, any additional items to be added to the forward work programme from anyone? I don't see any hands raised. No, I haven't got any other items. So we'll go to the recommendation, which is that the committee considers the draft forward work programme and approve amendments necessary, and that the internal audit performance of risk manager, which I guess is your full title, Lisa, in consultation with the chair and vice chair of the committee, be authorised to vary the forward work programme between meetings as the need arises. So can I have a proposer, please, for that? Councillor Healy, seconder Councillor Carberry. All in favour? Anyone against? None against. Any abstentions? No abstentions. So that's carried unanimously. And there we've finished the formal part of this meeting. So I thank everyone for their attendance, and I'd ask members to stay on, and indeed Audit Wales to stay on for the next session with Audit Wales. So thank you very much. Anything else, Lisa? No. So we close.